Okay, let's start it. It looks like it's 3:30 right now. Thank you so much for joining this session. I'm Jane Russell from the University of Iowa, and today we will present collaborative work, feedback intervention, personalized feedback using learning data, implemented in the large introductory chemistry course. As you see, the list of the presenters, several experts partner with Dr. Brummett in implementing this intervention effectively and seamlessly. And those experts are Anna Murray Smith, Senior Analytics Specialist, and Sara Nasrollahian, Assistant Director of the Center for Teaching. And Dr. Brummett is a passionate faculty who cares so much about student success. And he will begin this presentation with a problem that he wanted to solve.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that. I'm definitely lucky to work with quite the range of experts that were able to help me out. So the center of the problem comes from these large enrollment courses where I might have 600 to 1,000 students. They're oftentimes freshmen coming from a diverse set of backgrounds coming in, and they're often wanting to be very high achieving students, but sometimes they hit bumps along the way. They need different levels of support, and really at some level they need a kind of individualized support at some level to commenting on and helping with how they are approaching studying, how they're digesting the material. And obviously I'm as much as I would like to be able to clone myself at sometimes, I am only one person, and even with a set of TAs, it's tough to get directed feedback and support for a class of that size. And so, as much as I want to, it can still be challenging. And part of the problem is that we don't necessarily have all of the available data on students, on what they're doing offline, on different sorts of metrics that the data is there, but we don't always have easy access to it. And we're not necessarily the experts in metacognition and motivational messaging. For myself, I am a chemist, and so this is not entirely my background. And for any sort of large scale messaging, it does have some sort of time and resource commitment to that messaging. And so having something that helps with a lot of those, that's targeting our issues for our students, that are maybe helping with better learning and hopefully therefore better performance outcomes, that are addressing some of the discrepancies and learning gaps that we see, that we can try and target a lot of those little things if done correctly. And so luckily, I have a fantastic team that I'm able to work with, and that kind of leads us to how we can address some of these problems. And so if we kind of go to that solution slide, hit next, there you go. So I don't necessarily have access to all the data, but if I can work with the Office of Teaching and Learning Technology, they can get that information and get that data of who's engaging with which material for how long and when, and they can put that together in kind of a succinct, more digestible Excel file for me. I can work with the Center for Teaching to help craft different metacognitive messaging to kind of the right positive message that students will want to hear from the instructors. We can put all of this together in a way that makes it feel very personable, that I'm making a message just for this student, and we can use it to kind of craft and put everything together so that students says like this, even if they recognize it's likely a large scale email, like they know that something has been said specific to what they're doing. And I'm able to do that through kind of these other people assisting with a little bit of time, a little bit of resources, a little bit of their expertise, and it all kind of synthesizes in a product that can help help move the needle on students' engagement and hopefully their learning and performance as well downstream. So I will pass it off to the kind of the overarching process.
Okay, so as Adam was just talking about the process of thinking about and working together to make the messages more personal and in a way that we connect to every individual student in a way to help them to reflect on their own learning. We thought about many different aspects of this messaging, and that's why this what you see is the a kind of this process that we took on every time that we wanted to write a new message to the students. So it really started with thinking together, working with our research and analytics colleagues to think about and also to explore the data about students' learning behavior, about their performance, their outcomes in the exam, their engagement with the different course resources. And we tried to first think together and synthesize the data and see what it really is telling us in terms of students' engagement with the different resources in the course. Then we thought about, okay, so this time we are going to talk more specifically about their exam performance, and also we are going to acknowledge that you're doing a good job in, for example, working in or attending these learning assistance sessions, but you may also need to work more or pay more attention to this practice session. This is just an example. So we then targeted that this is what we're going to focus more on. We definitely started the messaging with acknowledging that, first of all, you're doing a good job. This is what you have done well. This is where you can also, we are here to support you, or you can also do better. And we understand the frustration, the busy workload or anything. So in a way that the students didn't feel like, this is going to be at them. The message, the tone was in a way to say, we are with you. We are there to support your learning. And we see that you're working hard. Then we thought about kind of drafting the message in a way to also help them to reflect on their own learning, so that this is not in a way that we are telling them what's going well or not. We are just observing something and we are encouraging them to also reflect on their kind of learning experience in that specific aspect. So the last thing was to very, very briefly offer one, not more than that, one or two strategies to say that this is what we would propose that you could do in order to improve your learning experience. A couple of things that we all the time kept in mind was that, number one, it should be very brief messaging, not a very long, extensive message with a lot of different strategies. Just one or two was enough. And also starting with a very, with them and ending with them. And also most of the time, the concluding sentence was that also, if you had any further thoughts, concerns, questions, just let me know as the instructor. And then we can have further conversation. So they could see that there's also space for them to ask their questions. It was more dialogical rather than just very transactional thing that they can, they just are going to receive some tips to do better in their studies. And this was very kind of a very it wasn't a linear process all the time. So we needed to go back to the previous stage. We always used what strategies we propose in order to, again, go back to the next round and see, okay, so let's see what we have done, what we have observed, just offered, and then how it really is turning out or translating into their performance. And then we again took on a new process of kind of drafting the next message for them. The other aspect of this process was that we tried to think about students in terms of not to group them specifically, but we try to see, okay, so what students are performing in a more similar way, so that we can also target the emails more efficiently at that point. And the other thing was that, kind of the episodes that we considered, it could be closer to the exam, it could be after the exam. It's really, we were very much intentional in thinking about the timelines that the message would be most beneficial to the students. So the fact that they were very much now, focusing on their exam, sometimes giving them a very small snippet of thinking about their exam wrapper, for example. What did you do, or how did you do that, or what would you like to do better? So it's really dependent on the timeline or the time that we were offering, or we were just trying to connect to them. And then the message was also informed. The tone was also informed by the timing of the semester as well. So this has been a great collaborative experience, and I can say that as an educational developer working at the Center for Teaching, every time that we had this think partners process together, I myself learned something new about students' experience, about using data to inform the ways that we connected with them, and also definitely a lot from Adam, from an instructor perspective, that what it really meant in the context of the course.
Okay, so we've taken a lot of those steps. We can kind of think about, we iterate on those steps at multiple times throughout the semester. This is a sample timeline from our second semester, where we would have the exam wrapper style emails sent out. So we're sending emails after each exam with the idea that's probably when a lot of students are going to be most attentive to different forms of feedback coming their way. And so you can see that we have different groups. Now this is how we maybe will kind of like roughly look at the groupings of students, of like different ones that scored really low, maybe ones that have an improvement, or ones that actually did well in the first exam and show a drop in performance. And so we kind of we've gone towards using different performance metrics as far as grouping students, but then we expand off of that to kind of give feedback not related to performance. So if we go to the next slide, we can start to see that the exam score is the overarching group criteria here. So we have exam scores that are maybe less than 50%. So these students are struggling with something along the way. Maybe it's engagement, maybe it's with different, maybe motivational factors. It could be a variety of things that have kind of gone into an exam score like this. And so we pull in at least the other metrics that we are able to look at. So homework scores and attendance, and in this case, practice problem scores as well, which I think the practice problem scores are really useful for us because they're not 4 points. And I think it is a metric that best gets at kind of a motivational factor. So how motivated are they to go above and beyond and do something that's not for points? And so that top student, Marie Curie, still has done well in the homework, is attending class, and is doing practice problems. So a very highly engaged student, but is still struggling on exam scores, their performance there. And so there's still a kind of a disconnect between the work they're doing and the performance outcome. We're not really learning that material. And so I might give different feedback related to that compared to Avogadro at the bottom that maybe is attending lectures but not doing practice problems and is also performing very low. So, and you can see then that I have a positive message and a kind of feedback text as well. So we try and find something that the student is engaging with, and we can set up a kind of if-then statement and concatenation equations in these in an Excel file to say if they're doing above this, for attendance or for practice problems, we want to include that in as a positive thing that the student is doing really well. But then we also want to say, maybe for Marie Curie, they're engaged along the way. So I don't have any feedback in terms of engagement, but in terms of using those resources and how to reflect back and how to really gauge their understanding. Maybe there's other resources that I can direct that student to based off of those metrics, or versus for Nobel that maybe is not attending class, I can explain why. If you have a low class attendance, maybe just talking about why it's really important and why there is a assessing of putting a value on attending class and how that can translate into deeper learning and engagement in the course. But we can build in based off of these other metrics. We've grouped the students based off of one criteria, but we use the other sets of data to kind of target messages of both a positive and sort of some sort of metacognitive feedback statement that's getting at their data. It's using their data so that the message is crafted for them. And then as a whole, when we start to think about this, this is just the feedback. We still have to put it into a larger framework of something that isn't just a positive message and direct feedback. We want to have it be a little more well-rounded than that. So everybody is getting some tips along the way. Everyone's getting some maybe encouragement and positive affirmations along with things that they can do better. So if we go to that next slide, when we look at sending this out, we can say that first step is we've been incorporating the data in and using Excel logic, and I can through the use of those different equations in Excel, I can set this up and run it for hundreds of students at a time, so that everybody has something slightly different, more or less. Yeah, there'll be students that are the same, but it's still based on their data, and that it's nothing that isn't that's a block that everybody sees necessarily the exact same thing. But then I want to take that, I want to incorporate and blend that into some sort of personalized feedback, that it feels like I'm reaching out to them, that they're almost getting email directly from me. I mean, because they are, but we want to try and build that connection. I wish I had time to sit down with every single student and to talk with them about what they're doing. But with 1,000 students, it's not possible. But I can still establish that connection and that relationship to students, that it feels like I'm reaching out to just them. And so we take a lot of time to craft these messages, and that's where I go back and forth with Sara, and we can think about what sort of evidence-based messaging we want to incorporate here. I can also include links to different things on Canvas if I think that there's a useful resource. Instead of necessarily replicating that in writing, I can link out to other resources. I can have the positive feedback. I can have the action items. I can have study tips, and kind of craft it into as condensed of a version as we can. And then because we have all that in Excel, and I've set it up in Word, I can use mail merge to send that out to hundreds of students at a time, and achieve a widespread messaging. So if we kind of look at the end product there, we think about what this is. So this is, I know Sara said it's a brief message, and my definition and her definition of brief is probably different from what a student would say. This is probably an example of maybe one of our longer ones. But you can see that right off the bat, we can give some positive feedback. You're doing good with this. I know it can be frustrating putting in effort. And then you can see in the second paragraph, the red line is the feedback that's targeted towards them. Whether they necessarily recognize that or not, it's based off of their data and what they're doing. So that line will be a little bit different depending upon what metrics they have. I'm linking to an additional study tips video. And at the end, it's that open statement of like, I'm happy to meet with people, even though, I always get a little nervous sending that, but to, several hundred students at a time, I've never, my general sentiment is that if people want to meet, I'm happy to do that. I never encountered a time when I've, more of them email than I can meet with. But I think even still the message of that there's someone here that's willing to meet with you and talk with you and help you, even if that's not me, I can have link to, tell them to talk to other faculty or TAs. That's the openness of that message as well, that we kind of incorporate, that they're not alone. There is someone there that's wanting to help them. I think is a really important part of this. I saw one of the questions, what's the largest class size? So I've done it for 2 classes of about 600, and in the fall it was about 900 to 950 or so, as far as the largest class size. And that's not necessarily the grouping size, but yeah. And then I think it's important to say, I kind of hit on what's happened each semester that this is, as Sara mentioned, that this is not a, we were very iterative on this. We take feedback at the end. And I think we'll see some of that here in a little bit. So first semester, we were using the data and targeting what we thought were, a variety of pieces of the courses that the course that were going to be really important. We only emailed after exams, and we did encourage that metacognitive kind of reflection. Based on that feedback, we in the second semester, we used the data to make the groups, but we were very, very careful to have no mention of performance, or as much as possible, because I think that did have ramifications outside of what we expected. But we were targeting then also more specific metrics, that we knew to correlate with course success. We also had more consistent positive messaging. So simply emailing students like, hey, you're really doing a good job at engaging with this, and maybe also your performance kind of came along for the ride as well. And then this semester, what we're doing right now is that we're sending emails to every student before the exam. So it's a little bit of the, instead of just the exam wrapper style, we have a little bit of the just-in-time messaging, but we're using data to still kind of help guide their preparation, to say, oh, maybe you haven't gotten into the practice problems yet. This would be a good time to start thinking about that. You have gotten into the practice problems a little bit. Here's how you can use that. What's the next step in that studying to prepare you for the exam? And then we're still doing the post-exam emails, kind of similar to what we did in fall, but we've added another layer to that now, so that everyone's getting an email beforehand, and then the emails afterwards are kind of targeted groupings that similar to what we did in the fall. I think that leads us into some of our data and results from the first 2 semesters.
Yeah, so of course, we put all this effort and time into it. So of course the question is, what impact did it have on students? So we have some data from the first 2 semesters that we did this project. Unfortunately, this is kind of a really hard question to answer if the message changed student behavior. We weren't able to do A/B testing or anything like that. So all we can do is kind of follow the students who received a message, who of course are like fundamentally different than students who didn't, and look at their engagement and performance in the course after they received the message. So in terms of engagement measures, there's a lot of things we try to target with the message, and some of them we can track with clickstream data and some of them we can't. The big one I'm going to focus on is practice problem completion, because that was mentioned numerous times. It's also, as Adam said, it's not graded, so it's totally optional and it's strongly related to performance on exams. But in addition, the things like study strategies and metacognition, we have no way of measuring that. And of course, for performance, our interest is exam scores. Next slide. So because of the fact that it's really hard to find an adequate comparison group, and it's very nebulous because there's we don't have an experimental group. We're just kind of looking for patterns and trying to see what's happening and understand how students respond to these messages. So again, I said I was going to focus on practice problem completion. So we're going to look at students who received a message after the first exam. And we see similar patterns across both semesters. And when we look at their practice problem completion, the no message group is in green, and the students who received an email is in orange. And of course, you can see from the start that the students who did poorly on the exam and received a message generally weren't the ones completing the practice problems on average. And that red bar indicates when the email was sent out. So these are before and then after the exam, before and after the email. And what you can see is for the students who received a low exam score, their average completion of the practice problems increased on average, but still remained lower than the students who did not receive an email. Of course, the other thing that could be impacting this, of course, is that they got a low exam score, and that itself might have been, enough to prompt them to do something. But hopefully those two things in tandem kind of work together. And then we can look at their second exam performance, and we can see the students in the low exam group performed higher on the second exam, after receiving the message and after receiving their first exam score, but it was still lower than the overall class. And then after exam 2, we get a bunch more groups. So as Adam showed, the exam groupings, or the message groupings are based on, for the first exam, only on low exam scores, but for the second exam, we have 3 groups: students whose performance decreased, shown in purple, from the first exam to the second, students whose performance increased from the first exam to the second, and then students who had 2 low exam scores across the first 2 exams, and then of course the rest of the class. And you can see that the groups behave differently. That red bar is indicating before and after, pre and post. You can see that the drop in exam scores had a substantial increase in students who completed the brightest problems. Again, it's hovering around 30%. So that's not great, but it is more than prior. And then the students who had a low exam score had a very, very small increase in practice problem completion. And the students who improved their exam score actually decreased their practice problem completion, probably because they're like, oh, I'm doing great. And then we can see the similar results in exam performance, with that the students who did a bunch more practice problems doing much better on the third exam. The students who had 2 low scores did a little bit better, and of course, acknowledge, regression to the mean and all of this. And then the students who improved, doing slightly worse. And so you can see that their actions kind of reflect their exam score. So that gave us a little more optimism about that we were actually understanding what's going on. Next slide. In addition to just looking at outcomes and click-stream data, we also asked students how they felt about these things. So across 2 semesters, and of course we're going to survey the students in this semester, which a much broader swath of students got emails, and they got more emails. But across the first 2 semesters, we had 573 students respond, and this was about 75% of the students who received an email. So that's a pretty good response rate. And we asked them, how helpful are these emails to you? How motivating were they? Did you even remember you got an email? But most of them did, so that's good. Generally, the majority of students across both semesters found them helpful. And then, the vast majority of them found them motivating, which is good. A little bit more in the fall semester, responded neutrally to both prompts. But the question format was slightly different. So it's really hard to just say that we had different outcomes. But generally, there's very few students who have found them unhelpful, and a very tiny amount of students who found them demotivating, which was encouraging to us. We also, this is only in the fall semester, we specifically asked them, after you received the email, was there anything you did or changed? And this harkens back to the fact that there's a lot of behaviors that we can't track. And unfortunately, and a little bit surprisingly to me, the things that students mentioned are not the things that we can track. So the most common response is that they sought out more class resources, which is, we can look at the clicks on the PowerPoints and the various class resources, and attempted to change their study habits, and which we can't track. So that was about 30% of respondents. And then students who already had good study habits, so they continued to work hard and study more. Again, something that's hard for us to tell if that's happening. 23% of students said they reached out to Adam or the TAs for help. And about 18% said they engaged more seriously with the lecture, which again is something we can't really track. We know if they attended the lecture, we don't know how seriously they were engaged or if they were just asleep the whole time. And then Jane's going to talk about the small subset of students who found those emails demotivating.
So we were happy to see the majority of students reported the message was helpful and motivate them. but also there is a small number of students said that message was demotivate them. So instead of ignore, because it's a small number of students, we really want to understand why the message they felt it demotivate them. So we really look at the students who reported. 22 students out of 573 students said that message was demotivated. So when we look at all the comments, what we found, some students have some assumption that if they get email or message from instructor after exam, it might not be good. So they have those assumptions, even though the message was not related to their performance, but they might felt that way. I mean, please keep in mind that we ask this question at the end of the semester, which is there is some time difference when students receive those emails. So they might reflect and that time that they felt, okay, if I got the email from the instructor after the exam, so I must not be doing right. So there is some students that responds that. And also when we look at some their comments about the message was helpful or not, the majority students said that the message was helpful. And then also we asked them if still they want to receive that type of the message in the future. And the majority of them, yes, they want to have receive the message. So we can kind of see, even though they found that the message was helpful, and also they want to keep getting the message in the future, but that message might just have their perception of that I'm not doing right. That's why they make them some demotivate. And also we look at them, who they were. So all the 22 students, there were no students, URM students, and 3 of them was generation students. And then as you see here, only 4 of them received the A, C minus or below grade, and most of them received A's and B's. So we can see the students who high achieving students also have those assumptions that getting email from the instructor may not be good after exam. So that's why that we learned. So Adam actually changed a little bit this semester, that message those students before exam. So, and then also transparent, talk to students, all of you are gonna get feedback from me. So we kind of improved a little bit, did a little bit differently based on students' feedback.
Yeah, so like what Jane said and Anna said in the chat to comment, it was one of the things that we did change this semester. It was in our initial feedback, and in those pre-exam ones, we were very transparent with, maybe everyone is getting an email, but it has information and feedback targeted just for you. So we're trying to approach it from that perspective, hoping that it normalize that everyone's getting a message and this has useful bits of information for you. And I think that the encouraging thing for me is that so far I have found that this feedback using the analytics at the scale that I operate has worked. It has been effective. I feel like I have some lever I can pull to move the needle a little bit. Is it a magic bullet? No, I think changing student behavior is really challenging, and for a wide array of reasons. But I think if we have some ability to kind of move the mass, move that many students in a direction towards not only better learning, but then kind of the outcome, better performance, I think that has ramifications in sense of belonging, that growth mindset, how long they're able to persist in STEM. So I think we're trying to do a lot of things there. I feel like we are able to do that. I think we're still learning. And one of the things I think we've mentioned a few times is that early intervention has been well received this semester, and we're all excited to kind of see that round of data that will be start processing that in just a few weeks, I guess, to see if the new round of data is able to maybe continue to improve upon the past bits of success that we've had, and to see if we can continue evolving our feedback to have more of an impact for more students. For kind of, again, students coming from a very diverse set of backgrounds, and trying to kind of close these learning gaps and kind of move students towards better learning and better performance. I think this is a great way to end on a few quotes that we found from the feedback we received at the end of the semester. So I think this is a great place to kind of stop and see if we have any questions about anything that's come up over the course of this talk.
And I just wanted to add, like, real quick, we got a lot of really positive messages from students. This is a very small subset, and Adam also received responses from students. And we don't talk about it a lot, but that sense of connection in a very large class seems to be a large part of what the students really appreciate about that. So you can kind of see that in the responses.